How much would you pay for this product? Now, what if I told you that this was made in China? Would the price that you had in mind suddenly drop? Be honest. Think about it. For many decades, these three words made in China meant only one thing: cheap. Not necessarily bad quality, but definitely not premium. Chinese products were basically something you would not show off to your friends. But something very interesting is happening right now, and almost nobody is talking about it. See, in just one single decade, China has completely flipped this narrative. They have executed what is perhaps the most ambitious brand transformation that we have seen in entire history. Look at this chart. In 2010, less than 50 Chinese companies were in the list of Fortune 500 companies in the world. But fast forward to today, there are around 130 Chinese companies in that same list. Today, Chinese brands command premium prices that used to be reserved exclusively for Western and Japanese brands and products. But the question then is, how did an entire country go from being seen as the world's cheap factory to now creating brands that global consumers actually want and aspire to own? And because most of us who are watching are based in India, what can we steal from China's playbook? That is exactly what I will dive into today. This video is supported by Zerodha01 Media Network. My name is Anurag Bansal, and let us decode. See, for many decades, the global deal was very clear. Countries like America, Europe, and Japan would handle design and branding, while China would quietly assemble and ship goods without ever getting visibility or credit for it. And this happened because China had extremely low labor rates. In fact, it was so low that while the US was spending $5 per hour on labor, China was doing the same job at just $0.5 per hour. That is 1/10 the price, and obviously nobody would say no to such a good deal. Now that basically made China the world's manufacturing hub. Today, it produces about 30% of everything that the world manufactures, and that is more than the next 4 countries put together. But the problem with this approach is that there is a ceiling. I'll explain this with a very interesting example. See, in the field of economics, there is an interesting concept called the smile curve. At the higher ends of the smile, you have things like design, R&D, and also marketing and branding, which basically capture most amount of value. And at the bottom of the smile is manufacturing. The problem with China was that it was stuck at that very bottom. To give you a real-life example here, when a company like Apple sells an iPhone, they take home around $600 in profit. But the Chinese factory that assembles these iPhones earns only roughly about $8. Very similarly, if a Nike sneaker sells for $100, the factory that makes it only earns about $2.50. Now that is the same dynamic across different industries and pretty much everywhere. Now the thing is, this particular bargain only works while cheap labor stays cheap. And guess what happened? Over time, the cheap labor advantage that China had very slowly started to die down. Another thing was that by 2010, more than 400 million middle-class Chinese had money to spend. They were sort of tired of buying Western brands manufactured in their own backyard. Margins also vanished, growth stalled, and something obviously had to be done about it. So around 2010, China made a very interesting decision that went on to change absolutely everything. They decided to stop being just a factory, and they decided to become the brand of the world. And in 2015, they made this official. They launched something called Made in China 2025.
Chinese leaders have been working to transform Asia's #1 economy with their Made in China 2025 plan.
Now, the idea was very simple: turn China from the world's factory to the world's brand. And what followed was a 4-part brand strategy that was executed at record speed. First, China realized that if you cannot build credibility quickly, you need to buy it. To give you an example, in 2005, a Chinese company that nobody had even heard of made a very surprising announcement. Lenovo was purchasing IBM's entire personal computer business, including the iconic ThinkPad brand, for $1.75 billion. Now, at that time, American analysts called this very stupid because how could a Chinese manufacturer even manage a premium American brand? But what they probably missed that this was not just about buying a brand for the sake of it. Behind the scenes, Lenovo relocated entire R&D teams. They studied every single process, every design principle, and every marketing playbook that made ThinkPad legendary. Yes, of course, they struggled initially. Integration took a few painful years, but by 2015, Lenovo became the world's #1 PC seller. And now, all new ThinkPads are designed in China. And it's not even just this. This same pattern repeated across different places. Geely, which is a Chinese automobile giant, acquired Volvo for $1.8 billion. Another example is that Haier purchased General Electric appliances for $5.6 billion, and the list goes on and on. To give you a reference, between 2010 and 2020, Chinese companies spent more than a couple of $100 billion on overseas acquisitions. The point was not simply market share, it was like a direct download of supply chain, discipline, safety standards, and brand management DNA. Then came the second phase of China's strategy, which was even more ambitious. They decided that they would not compete in established categories, but they would dominate emerging ones where the rules had not been written yet. And that is where China made its most brilliant move. Rather than trying to beat Apple at smartphones or Mercedes at combustion engines, which are battles they would likely lose by the way, China put their resources into emerging technologies where Western dominance was not yet established. These were spaces like electric vehicles, drone technology, digital payments, 5G, and renewable energy. The government also backed this with some serious amount of money. They put in more than $60 billion in EV subsidies, $180 billion in 5G infrastructure, and they also set up dedicated drone testing zones within the country. Let's take BYD for an example. They started as a battery company in 1995. They were not even into automobiles like they are today. But the thing is that they perfected battery technology, which is the heart of electric vehicles, so nicely that when the automotive world shifted to electric vehicles, BYD was ready and right there. In fact, BYD's success story is so great that their biggest competitor, Elon Musk, also praised them globally. And this success has been so phenomenal that BYD now sells more electric vehicles than even Tesla. And because of bets like these, China now builds more than 60% of world's electric cars and 80% of EV batteries. And this exact same pattern is almost everywhere. DJI grabbed 70% of global drones before others could even realize that something serious is happening. TikTok defined short video before Instagram knew what was hitting them, and so on and so forth. There are many such stories. Now, the interesting thing about doing this is that when you are the one who defines a new category, you also get to define what premium means in that very category. And that is exactly what China is doing right now. And honestly, that is something even small businesses and entrepreneurs today can start doing, which is owning their brand, going direct to consumer, and also shaping how they are perceived in the larger market. Now, tools like Odoo make that process incredibly simple. If you are building a business and you want to set up an online store, Odoo's e-commerce builder lets you do exactly that in just a few steps, and that too without the need of any technical or coding language. Basically, by following 4 simple steps, you will have the skeleton of your online store ready to be customized. You can then list your products easily by just adding necessary information like name, price, and image, and then the page goes live. You can also then use drag and drop design tools, animations, background themes, font styles, and a lot more to make it aesthetically looking, and you get integrated invoicing, payment, and also shipping support. And the best part is that you get the first app free for lifetime along with hosting and support, and also a custom domain free for the first year. So if you have an idea and you want to not just be any other seller in the market, this could be a really smart starting point. Anyway, let's move on to the third phase. In this, China was able to leverage something that they had perfected over many decades, which is adaptation. See, in 2014, when Xiaomi entered India, they did not just translate their Chinese playbook exactly into India. They actually completely rewrote it, customized to India. They obsessed over local pain points. For example, they tweaked hardware for dusty roads and our lighting conditions. They introduced huge battery sizes for India's power cards. They made dual SIM standard at a time when companies still did not take it seriously. And by 2019, they had built more than 3,000 plus service centers because Indians look for and love after-sales service. And the result was that within just about 5 years, Xiaomi overtook Samsung, not by being cheaper, but by being more relevant to Indian consumers. And this pattern has sort of repeated across different industries. For example, when BYD entered India's EV market, they did not compete on price at all. In fact, they launched cars at more than 30 lakh rupees and positioned themselves alongside European luxury brands. Basically, multiple decades of contract manufacturing taught Chinese firms to treat flexibility almost like a religion. And now they're able to use that skill to market taste instead of vendor specifications. But anyway, moving on, then comes the final phase, which is the most interesting and also the most powerful. See, for multiple decades, Chinese companies used to hide their origins. They created brand names that sounded Western or Japanese. You can think about brands like Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, Shein, etc. None of them really sound Chinese as such. But by 2018, this changed as well. Chinese brands decided that they would proudly begin embracing their Chinese identity. This movement, by the way, even has a name. It's called Guohao, which means national tide in Chinese. Now, a perfect example of this is Chinese sportswear brand Lin, Li-Ning, which by the way also sponsors India's badminton star PV Sindhu. Now they got models to walk the ramp in New York wearing jackets with Chinese characters and colors. Now this became a movement. It was so strong that a lot of Chinese Gen Z now prefer domestic labels only because they feel culturally authentic to them. And because of small activities and things like these, very slowly Chinese became the flex and not really the flaw. A Li-Ning racket with PV Sindhu or a BYD bus in London signals the badge is a strength, not really a liability. But anyway, all of that said and done, while this brand transformation of China is definitely very impressive, the truth is that it is far from being complete. Yes, there are still many limitations here. First, many top Chinese brands have limited soft power overseas. Western consumers still carry some trust deficits when it comes to made in China products, and even in India, some people still think that China equals to cheap. But none of this can honestly take away from what China has already achieved. So now with all of this context in place, the biggest question is, what can India really learn from this? See, first, we need to act early. We cannot always keep waiting for categories to start maturing. We also need to create them. For example, the world did not really ask for DJI drones or TikTok reels. China just built them and they became successful. Second, we need to localize aggressively. See, Indian brands already know their customers very well, at least most of them. Just tweaking will not help in the long run. We need to rebuild from scratch for the next 500-700 million odd consumers. Third, we need to move very fast. China compressed Japan's 30-year playbook into 10 years. The big question is, can India do it in 5 years? And lastly, fourth, we really need to start wearing our own badge proudly. If made in China can become premium in today's time, given where they were a few years back, made in India can absolutely get there by as early as 2030. But only if we all start treating it like a strength and not really like a weakness. That's all for this video. I would love to know your thoughts. Which Indian company do you think is best positioned to help India pull all of this off? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and I'd love to have a discussion with you. Also, if you found this breakdown valuable, do subscribe for more because I promise you there is a lot more coming. I'll see you on the next one. Take care and goodbye.